Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so happy you're with us today. This week, our guest who is here for the third time is Mark Ireland, and he's been a leader in the field of proving afterlife survival for a great many years. In fact, he's the son of the very prominent 20th century psychic medium Richard Ireland. He's also, I have to say, the co-founder of a wonderful organization called Helping Parents Heal, which has now got more than 26,000 members, and it assists bereaved parents worldwide. I'm really a big fan of this group because they do such wonderful, wonderful work. He has participated in a mediumship research study conducted by the University of Arizona and the University of Virginia, and he currently operates a medium certification program. And he's also the author of Soul Shift and the Persistence of the Soul, both available wherever books are sold. For many years, I sort of lost track of him, and then I kind of got back in touch with him again. And he's very prominent in this work, but he's such a quiet guy. He kind of operates behind the scenes. Many people, promote themselves. He doesn't promote himself at all. But I went back, I read his books, and I love the work he does. So, Mark, I'm so very happy to have you back with us again.
Well, thanks, Roberta. I appreciate it and all your kind words.
Well, let's talk about how you kind of really got back into this, but you've been in it since you were a small child. I mean, I went back and I read your books again. I had read them when I first kind of rediscovered you, and that was back 6 or 8 months ago. And I read so many books that I can't keep them back in my head. But I went back and looked, especially at your second book. I rediscovered the conversation you had with your father about your previous lifetime when you were like 4 or 5 years old, and you were talking to your father about your previous life, which kind of boggled my brain. I think you had kind of forgotten that you had a previous lifetime, which kids do. They will talk about a previous lifetime with their parent and think nothing of it. And then by the time they're 4 or 5 years old, they've forgotten about it. And I'd like to talk about that. There's so many things that were in that book that I'd like to talk about, frankly, again, because I had kind of forgotten how marvelous that book really is. And I recommend it actually pretty strongly. The Persistence of the Soul by Mark Ireland. I'd like to kind of suggest that people read that book because it's a handy compendium of a number of things about how we test mediums, and you test mediums and you certify them, right?
Yes, that's correct. And my primary goal there is I'm not trying to get articles in science journals or anything like that. I'm just trying to vet resources for people so that bereaved people who are typically pretty fragile have a trustworthy resource to go to. And there's never any guarantee that a reading is going to be great, but it does increase the odds of a good session.
Later in that book, you talk about some people who were taken advantage of by a medium that just had a placard up beside the road.
Yeah, it was probably within a year of our son Brandon's passing that a therapist we knew introduced us to another family who had gone through something similar. Their son had fallen into a reservoir and drowned, got knocked out on the way in. And so they were pretty distraught and were wanting to talk to other folks who had been through the same thing. And they asked, how we were able to move forward and kind of continue in life in a positive way or as positive as possible. And we just said, we had an understanding of there being something more, a level of faith and also knowledge and understanding. But that, we had found that in addition to a lot of other things, that good reading from a quality medium was helpful to us. Unfortunately, she got impatient, the mother, and didn't consult me for recommendations because I knew some people I was going to steer her to. And she was driving down the road and saw this sign for a psychic reader and went into the shop, and the woman charged her X amount of money and then told her that her son was in some kind of holding place, and that he was there with a mother-in-law who was kind of an evil person, and there was a spell on him and all this garbage, and that, but for $400 she could undo the spell. And she was just so distraught. She left there and went home and cried. And I said, yeah, that's a mistake. So I just wanted other people to understand that. And that's why that chapter's in the book, to really help people avoid that kind of thing and know where to go if you want to have a mediumship reading where you have a much better chance with somebody who's got integrity and is operating from an ethical standpoint.
Do not go to a sort of street corner medium, and if some medium says that your loved one is in trouble, but they can help the person get out of trouble, just pay them a certain amount of money, walk out the door, because that person is a crook.
Yeah, I mean, it's
There's
pretty
no
obvious.
such thing as that kind of problem. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think the thing is they're getting somebody who's in a real fragile state, and that person may not be thinking rationally or really be in a position to make a good judgment about something like that at the time. So that's why I included that, because I think you have to admit there are people in the field who are fraudulent. There's also a lot of
There are a lot who are not very good.
that too. And that's what I was going to say. I think there's far more that aren't very good or are more deluded and think they're better at it than they are. Than there are frauds. But both of those can be harmful to people who are grieving.
Yes. Right.
So that's why
There are some who are downright frauds, and there
Mhm.
are a lot who are not very good. I think we can summarize by saying that. But if you are certifying them, then how would people find them? Is there a website they can go to?
Mhm. Yeah. So my website actually has a link to that site. So I have a certified medium site. I have a site for my dad and videos of him back in the day that people might find interesting. I have a link to Helping Parents Heal, but all those links can be found on my website, markirelandauthor.com. Mark with a K, Ireland like the country, author, markirelandauthor.com. You'll find links to the Certified Medium site, Helping Parents Heal, my dad's videos, and a lot of other media and things.
And that will be in the materials that go with this program. So you don't need to worry about that, and don't drive off the road. You'll be able to find that all there.
Yeah, and just so people understand what the certification process entails, anyone applying for it has to go through 5 blinded readings conducted on Zoom with no video. They don't know who they're reading for until the time it starts, and they're only given a first name. Then they go through a 5 to 10 minute stretch of just giving anything they get. And then they're asked a series of questions about one specific deceased person, first name only. And so we basically measure the accuracy of all the comments they make, not only accuracy, but how specific, how pertinent it is to that relationship between the person who passed and the sitter, as well as bonus statements that are highly specific and highly applicable to that relationship. So that's really how it goes. And it's at this stage, it's a very small percentage of people that are passing. So I think that's actually a good thing, because what it means is we're getting better people in through the program that are certified, and eliminating those who maybe have a little bit of it but aren't quite good enough, because again, you're dealing with people who are a bit fragile.
One of the things about mediumship that we are discovering, and psychic ability in general, is that it runs in families. It's hereditary. I'm pretty confident now that's true. Before I wasn't so sure, but we've interviewed quite a few people who have psychic ability now on Seek Reality, and almost always they have it in the family, many times on both sides. But almost always at least one parent has it, and your father had it, and it's pretty clear you have that ability as well. And you have family members who have had this ability. And so, which I think is kind of exciting and fun. You have this hereditary ability, and kind of exciting. And so, but you seem not to have really made much use of it in your life.
I think more
comes and goes, kind of,
Yeah.
right, for you?
I would say, yeah. And so my father had it, his mother had it, his brother had it, and then on my mom's side, I had aunts who had it too. And these are all to varying degrees, but nonetheless, I'd say that for me, it's more of a guidance kind of thing, guiding my life to some extent. But I have not tried to practice it or, become a full-time psychic or medium type person. I have had flashes of it that have been pretty surprising. Maybe someday I'll be more interested in doing that. But I think like I said before, I still have a full-time job. The writing that I've been doing and the podcasting and shows have been more focused on taking this kind of journalistic approach that I felt was important to come across as detached observer, if you will, of the whole field and to be able to report on it in a fair and reasonable way. So if tomorrow I said, okay, I'm going to fully develop this and I'm going to try and become a medium or something, then I probably couldn't do that anymore, at least from the same approach. But yeah, it does run in family lines. I think that's been validated by a number of different research institutions like Windbridge, for example, that it does run in family lines, and whether that's a biological component, a socialization thing, or just a spiritual thing, I can't say, but it is true that it's there. Even my son, it's manifested with him too. I think more of the psychic stuff,
Talk about it a little bit. You kind of get hunches, you get sudden awarenesses of things. You describe them in the book about how you kind of get feelings.
Yeah, it's funny. Just the other day, I was talking to someone who I was talking about another friend who travels a lot for work. And he said, "Oh, I'd like to invite her to, this or that, but she's in Asia all the time." And I just said, "Kuala Lumpur." And he goes, "That's where she is right now." It was just a goofy thing. I mean, it's meaningless, but why would I say Kuala Lumpur? And it didn't come to me like in a vision, or I didn't hear it or whatever. It occurred to me to say Kuala Lumpur. And that's where she was, of all places in Asia, that I would
Yeah.
say that. But in other cases, it's been a little more pronounced. I think the most predominant one, or the most amazing one for me, and I don't know if I mentioned this on our last one. If so, I'm sorry for the redundancy. But for a 3-year stint, I'd been invited to go to speak at a spiritualist church in San Francisco called the Golden Gate Spiritualist Church. It was founded in 1924 by a woman named Florence Becker, who I heard was very similar to my dad in her abilities. She passed in 1970. And each of these 3 years that I would go there to do a talk, I brought a medium friend, Tina Powers, who lives in Tucson. And I would do a talk and she would give readings to the congregation. Now, this particular time, though, she wanted me to share a message. She said, "Mark, I think you're going to get a message. Will you share it?" And I'm like, "Sure, I will." And she kept pestering me about this repeatedly, even up until the day we go into the church. And she's like, "Mark, if you get a message, will you share it?" I'm like, "Yes." So I went into their healing room, sat down, and quieted my mind for a little bit. And while I was sitting there on this bench, a name came to me, Max. But then immediately, Maxine. I thought, oh, maybe it's Maxine, not Max. Now, I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. It just came in like an idea or a thought would, just floated in. So I gave my talk. And then at the end, I'm like, do the names Max or Maxine mean anything to anyone here? And then the church pastor, he's like, whoa. He says, well, Max and Maxine were twins born to the church founder, Florence Becker. And they were delivered stillborn, but they grew up on the other side in spirit. He says that's a secret only known to a few old-time church board members. He says, I think we know who is here right now. And then afterward, he took me upstairs to show me this painting. It was a landscape. It had a long winding road with two little figures at the end. And he says, that's Max and Maxine. So to get something that specific with two unusual names was pretty wild. But it was a lesson for me because it was very subtle. And I think that's the nature of how this can work for us typically, at least for me, very subtle, not loud, not like the burning bush kind of thing, but just a very subtle thing, like a thought flows in or something like that.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful? I have a hunch that this is a latent ability in everyone, but it's just that people who have it in their background, in their DNA, just have it much more strongly. I mean, I think all of us can think of a moment in our lives when we got this, but we just don't respond to it because it's just not in our background to respond to it. But I think it's something, I think it's a human trait, but it's just not in your heritage. It's something that's just a lot stronger.
Yeah, I think there's some truth in that. I think my dad would say everybody is psychic to some degree, but I think
Yes.
there's how much they could develop it if they wanted to, or how much they recognize it. And we live in a society really that's very materialistic and
Yes.
doesn't take these things seriously anyhow. So a lot of people don't want to be embarrassed about trying to, even admit having a belief in it, let alone ability with it. But I think it does vary in intensity and strength. And I think there's something to do with the lineage piece of that. What it is, is it something biological? Is it the pineal gland in the brain?
Yeah.
Is it
Right.
is it just a spiritual kind of thing where you're able to access your subconscious better than other people? I can't say. I don't really understand or know that. I don't think anyone really has the answer to why that is, but it is clear that it does follow family lines.
There's another wonderful story in your book about someone who is a very extreme skeptic. And but someone persuaded him, if you survive your death, which would be a big surprise to you because you're such a skeptic, will you let us know that? And he said yes. And I think, I don't remember the whole story in detail, but it was something about, if you do, let's come up with something you're going to say at your funeral. And it was something that came at the end of a commercial, something like, do you remember the phrase? I don't remember the phrase.
This was actually someone else's story that I know. I just included it because I thought it was phenomenal.
Yeah, I thought it was too. Say
But her name
the
is
phrase if you can
Lindsay,
remember it.
and her story had to do with her husband, who I guess he is morbidly obese, and because of his health, he passed at a fairly young age. But I'm trying to think of the exact phrase. But anyhow,
It was like, and that's the way it is, or something like that.
Yeah, from me to you, or from my arms to you, or
From me
something
to
like
you.
that.
Yeah.
But basically what had happened was, so he was a non-believer, he was a skeptic, but he did promise her that if he did survive death, that he would come through and make his presence known. It was actually at the funeral service that a man, I think his name was Mahal, who was at the service but
Yes.
didn't know anything about this. He felt compelled to stand up in the middle at some point and say, well, he's here right now and he has a message for you. And then it was from like a Pillsbury commercial, I think.
Yes.
From my heart to yours. And he did the motion and the words exactly as the husband used to do to her all the time. He would say, from my heart to yours, or something along those lines. But he did the exact thing. And
Isn't that boggling? So
yeah.
so this guy who was psychic stood up in the and he spread his arms and he said, from my heart to yours. Well, if ever there was proof of an afterlife, this skeptic guy gave it to his wife at his own funeral. I love it. I just love that. What a great story that is.
It really was. And I just had to include that. I met him back in 2006, I think it was, during a group healing training kind of thing. So, but
I love that. And what a gift to his wife. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
All right. So there you have it. Everyone says, well, no one's ever done that. No one's ever proven it. Well, there you have it. So, all right, Mark, why have we not long since shown the skeptics the door? Why have we not been able to prove it long since?
Well, first off, science never really, from my understanding, never accepts something as proven. They'll say the evidence,
No,
points to
no,
this or
no,
whatever.
no. All of that is just to me complete, pardon the expression, crap. I mean, they really, no matter, it wouldn't, what you could have a row of Albert Einstein and everybody, you could have them return and they would still say it's not proven.
No, I agree. And that's where I was going to say you'll never be able to do that to their satisfaction. So I've long felt like I used to try and argue against skeptics and this and that. I even have a chapter in the book about the skeptics and the mindset.
Yeah.
But I think I've gone to the point of just saying, it's going to be a grassroots thing to bring about change because scientific materialism is so deeply embedded in academia and in culture on the whole that to overturn that is a very difficult proposition. But
Why do they hold
sometimes,
on to something so depressing as you blink out like a light? Why is that their happy thought?
yeah, it's not their
When you
happy
have
thought.
beautiful stories like that, this man stood up and he gave this gift to his wife at his own funeral. Yeah, and honey, now I believe because
And they
I'm there.
and the skeptics would say that's an anomaly or it's just coincidence or
It just has
something.
to happen once.
Yeah, no, I know.
I
It's a
mean,
tough,
you and I know what's true because we've seen it happen 100,000 times.
yeah. You can't change somebody's mind. They have to be open to changing it. And usually I think that comes about by virtue of a personal direct experience. So some of these folks, if they had an experience that was compelling enough, then maybe that would shift their thinking.
I don't think it can,
Maybe
dear. I
not.
don't.
It's their loss, really. It's a
I'm
shame.
sad for them.
Well, and the saddest part too, not just for them, but the false gospel that they spread, uh,
False gospel. Thank you. What a beautiful term. I'll have to remember that.
yeah. So which
Why?
which makes other people fear death and mourn their loved ones in such a way that it just tears them apart. So that's the byproduct of that mindset and trying to sell that to other people. Um, it's a depressing philosophy.
I can remember still what it was like to finally really, really get it and understand. Yes, it's like the door opens and you suddenly realize you really don't ever die. Suddenly there's no ceiling, there's no door. Everything, the horizon is forever. Did you ever have that moment? Do you still remember what that was like? Maybe you never did because of your father. Maybe you always knew. But there was a day when I stopped fearing and started knowing. I remember what that was like.
I think from growing up with my dad, it was instilled in me at a young age that there was more. I could see that through the demonstrations he did and giving messages to people that he didn't know with a lot of details, names, nature of relationships and things like that. So as a kid, I'm like, wow, there really is more. It's not just this. And so, but as far as a direct personal experience, I'd say the closest that I can come is I it was a year after my son Brandon passed that I had a direct out of body experience with him, meeting him in a place that was like a three-walled white room. And he was sitting on like what would be a countertop to it, but it really was not a physical place, I don't think. It was more probably for me, but it was a three-walled glowing white room with him there. And it was more real than waking reality. And where the third wall should have been was infinity. It was like the rest of the universe. It was just I felt like it was a meeting spot in the middle place between us.
Yes, yes.
And that was, for me, the most direct kind of experience of that type where I felt, like I had put my toe into that world or, on the way to that next world. And ironically, just a couple of months ago, a woman wrote me and she said, I had an experience, after my son passed, and she went on to explain it. And she said, I never thought she says, it was very, very, very real, but I always doubted it until I read page 189, I think it was, of Soul Shift. She goes, I had the exact same experience in a three-walled white room and with the fourth wall missing where it was infinity, the rest of the universe. So that was pretty cool to read, not only to know she
Yes,
had the same experience, confirming mine even more.
right.
So, But yeah, I think everybody gets there a different way. Hopefully for most people, they do get there, because to live in fear of death your whole life is a pretty it's kind of a drag on your reason for being here. You're
Oh,
not really
yes.
living.
When you really get it, it's just suddenly there's infinity, there's no end. What a joyous feeling this is.
Yeah. And look at all the near-death experience accounts and how similar some of them are, and the feeling that people have there are almost universally. Now, there's some that aren't this way, but a lot of them, they have this deep, pervading feeling of love beyond any love they've ever felt while in
Yeah,
a physical body. Colors that you can't even describe, that don't
yeah,
exist here.
yes,
Um,
yes.
and then just this sense of joyfulness. So yeah, I think those all give us a hint as to what our future entails. But we're here now for a reason, I think. So it's important to see that through and be of service and to grow yourself while you're here.
No, I mean, we are here. You and I are here to help other people understand what's really true about reality, about we're here to teach, you and I.
Yeah,
And
even though you started off with the reincarnation story when I was 3 years old, sitting with my
yes,
dad in the car.
and
So
you knew you had nine siblings in that lifetime. I
yeah, I
just,
mean, I don't remember any of that, but the research done by Ian Stevenson and
yeah,
subsequently by Bruce Grayson and Jim Tucker at the
yeah,
University of Virginia pertaining to reincarnation really says, the evidence is very strong, and it involves kids up to maybe age 6 or 7 at the oldest. And then they kind of become socialized and forget those memories. I don't remember them
right.
now, but my dad had this detailed conversation with me, and I was just answering questions, bam, 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 without hesitation. So that, I guess, tells me that, we've been here a lot longer than we think. We're more than just
It's even in the Gospels. Jesus talked about reincarnation. Everybody reincarnates repeatedly.
you're you're not just Roberta, I'm not just Mark. That's our present
No.
identity, but we're much more than that.
Yeah, no. I've had 17 lifetimes with my present spirit guide, and I've always been male. This is an unusual thing for me to be a female. So it's just, yeah, we do it over and over again, which is fine, which is, it's an interesting experience to, and that's why some children are gender confused until they go through puberty, after which they straighten out.
Yeah, I would think there are recollections of being somebody else in a different kind of body.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was gender confused till I hit puberty, and then it was, oh, okay, this is fine. I'll do it. I'll do it the way I'm supposed to do it this time around. It's fine. Actually, I think it's an advantage to be a female now, but before it was like, I I would prefer to be the other kind.
Yeah, men have had their way for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yes, because when I was young, it really was better to be a male. But now I think it's better to be female. But that's a topic for another program.
Yeah.
But all right, so let's talk a little bit about reincarnation. It the reason we're here quite clearly is to learn and grow spiritually, which we come here without any understanding of, though, which is pretty frustrating, I think, because we're not only are we born without memories of, except very dimly, of previous lifetimes, but we really don't have a clear understanding of what we're supposed to be doing, which is learning to be good. I mean, Jesus taught that, and other religions have taught that, but we don't really remember that that's what we're supposed to do. Learn to love, learn to forgive. We don't
Yeah.
remember that.
So we're into the speculative area here in terms of how these things work and all that. My opinion or my thought on it is that, we come into this life with a blueprint, kind of a path. And so when things line up and things are going properly, we're probably in that path and we haven't varied from it too far. So even though we don't necessarily have vivid memories that come to the forefront, even though people may have periods of deja vu, or as a young child, they may remember things from before. Um, I think we have this kind of guidance in our life, and it steers us where we're supposed to go, and we meet the people we're supposed to meet, and things that seem coincidental just seem to happen, but they're maybe more synchronistic. I've definitely seen that in my life, especially since the passing of my son, and that would involve the people I've met that are in the field of mediumship research, mediums themselves, um, meeting Elizabeth Boyson and the founding of Helping Parents Heal, all these kinds of things. I remember back, I have a chapter in my first book, Soul Shift, where I had a reading from Linda Williamson, who's a prominent medium in England. And during that, and this was back 20 years ago, almost, she was telling me about how I would be involved in the formation of a huge organization that would have worldwide impact and all this. And all I had to do was be myself and tell my truth. People would be drawn naturally and all this. And at the time, I'm like, what? What are you talking about? You know? And lo and behold, look what unfolded,
Yes.
organization with 26,000 members,
Yeah.
165 affiliate chapters worldwide, a conference every other year that draws 1,000 people. It's pretty amazing to think about. So those kinds of things tell me, okay, there was a plan here. And I remember her also, because I was getting impatient back then, like, when is this stuff going to happen? This is taking forever. And she did tell me, she goes, these things happen, don't always happen in the time frame we would like or we think they should.
It happened in
So
their own time.
yeah, exactly. So I guess I've learned to back off and just relax a little bit and just figure things will fall into place, and many of them have.
And so let's talk a little bit about Brandon. Do you think that was his time when he
Yeah, as hard as it was for my family and me, I do tend to think it was his time. I
he
think
was only 18, right?
yeah, he was 18. But he fit the characteristics of what you'd call an old soul in terms of his level of compassion and empathy, simplicity of living, not being hung up on how he was perceived by other people, befriending kids that were not popular, seeing those kids that maybe who were depressed or needed, more of a friendship, didn't have friends and things like that. And a lot of the other parents I've talked to whose kids passed at a young age have a lot of these same characteristics. So I don't know that he needed to be here that long. I think maybe he was here to set an example and to be a catalyst for all of this stuff to happen, just like maybe some of the other kids too.
Yeah.
I do recall on two occasions my father addressing Brandon and looking at him in a funny way where I thought, my dad knows something he's not telling me. Now, I never asked my dad, Dad, is there something going on here that I don't understand? I never did that. And I would imagine if he did know Brandon was going to pass at a young age, he wouldn't have said anything to me because it would just tear my heart out and make me worry every day and try and prevent it,
Of course, of course. Yeah, some gifts are very hard to receive, but that doesn't mean they're not gifts in a way.
Yeah. And I still get, because I know so many mediums now, I'm getting messages every time I see one of them, they'll say, this from your dad or this from Brandon and that kind of thing. So it's pretty interesting. I just had
Yeah, I'm sure.
Molly, who's a medium friend of mine who lives in Wisconsin. She's like, she said, oh, your dad's showing me your granddaughter waving a wand and performing magic. Well, that's my almost 6-year-old granddaughter, Lily. She loved the movie Frozen. So, and there's this Queen Elsa in there that performs magic and waves a wand. So that's exactly what she had been doing.
Of course.
Another one, Farrah Gibson, recently. I had not met her before until this dinner. I was meeting her and Michelle Claire, another medium friend. And so I bring up Brandon and I show Farrah a picture of Brandon. And I mentioned that he played bass guitar. And she says, oh, he said, but he says that his new bass had an extra string. Well, that was true. His original bass was a 4-string bass. And then for his last birthday, when he turned 18, just months before he passed, he wanted a 5-string bass and we bought him a 5-string bass. So that's a pretty obscure piece of information. And then she went on to say, he shows you that you were, like I see, taking all the strings off the guitar and restringing it. Well, just a couple days prior, I'd been in Prescott, Arizona with a friend, and she's walking downtown with me after a hike. And we go into a music store, and she asks the guy, "Oh, do you restring guitars?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah." I said, "You don't need to do that. I'll do it for you." So I bought her a set of strings and I restrung that guitar. I took all the strings off, put new ones on. So I get these little connections all the time. So
Yeah.
it's nice. I mean, it's been a long time, but I still say a prayer for him every night. I think about him every day. I feel like he's part of my life in
Of course,
some
he's
way.
part of your life. Oh, yes. Oh, my dear. Well, we're coming to the end of our time, if you can believe it. This always goes so quickly.
Mhm.
What do you want people to take from our time together today?
I think going back to what we talked about pertaining to how you view life, why you're here, what it's about. And so, hopefully people don't fear death and understand there's more so they can live fully now, and not be consumed by that fear or debilitating grief over the passing of a loved one. So that's it. How people get there's going to differ, but if this is all new to somebody or they're skeptical, they can read books about these phenomena, whether it's near-death experience stuff by like a book by Dr. Bruce Grayson or Eben Alexander, or on the mediumship, like my books or others. There's a number of different phenomena that are suggestive and provide a lot of evidence for this. And when you put them all together, it's a very compelling body of evidence. So just enjoy life, live it. You're here for a reason.
Enjoy life and live it, and you're here for a reason. And it's a wonderful, wonderful reason. Well, bless your heart, dear. Consider yourself hugged.
Thanks,
And
Roberta.
we'll do this again.
And take care.
You too, dear. Well, everyone, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Didn't you love him? Mark's website is markirelandauthor.com, and that will be in the notes below. And once again, my beloved friends, we've come to the end of our time together. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm very glad you could be with us today. Please never forget that you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began, you never will end. And when you get that, when you really get all the implications of that fact, the fact that your life truly is eternal, it changes everything in your life for the better. Next week, our guest will be Father Nathan Castle. He'll be here for the 9th time. Father Nathan is a Dominican priest. He lives and works in a community of Dominican men and women who serve the University of Arizona in Tucson. He's a very spiritual man, and about 25, probably going on 30 years ago now, he was recruited by elevated beings not in bodies to do spiritual rescue work. As we have come to understand, unfortunately, almost 25% of the people who die go off track for a time when they die, and Father Nathan helps to rescue some of those people when they feel ready to be rescued, not before, when they feel ready. And the result has been a series of what I think of as really amazing books. There, I think, are 3 books, but there may be 4 now. I'm not sure. We'll find out next week. The first one was called Afterlife Interrupted, Helping Stuck Souls Cross Over, and that came out in 2019. Then came book 2, and then came book 3. And I really look forward to seeing him again. He's just a delight. Father Nathan is a wonderful, wonderful spiritual man. And the fact that what the work he is doing is blessed, actually blessed by the Catholic Church, gave me a whole new view, frankly, of the Catholic Church. This week, we've been talking with Mark Ireland, who's been here for the 3rd time. And Mark is a longtime student of the evidence for death and the afterlife. And as you can see, he gets it. He really gets it. I hadn't talked with him for the better part of a decade. He was one of my first guests on Seek Reality, and I kind of lost touch with him. But as you can see, he's been very busy, and he is a beautiful, very spiritual man. So we'll have him back again together. We'll get together with him as well before too long. And frankly, my dear ones, we don't, I think, have time to talk about my books, but you know that I have written a lot of books as well. And we can talk a little bit about Teachings by Jesus, which is Jesus's website, a lot more important than my website and my books. Jesus is your single resource for all the beautiful divine truths that are brought to us in perfect love by the greatest teacher of all, who is Master Jesus. Unfortunately, there is, I think, a religion that calls itself Jesus's religion. He didn't start it. It was started by the Roman Emperor Constantine 300 years after Jesus's death. They use his name. They don't use his teachings. And what they teach has nothing to do with what Jesus taught. So finally, Jesus has a place where you can go and you can learn what Jesus taught. The genuine teachings of Jesus can at last truly come alive for us all. And if you're interested in learning about, frankly, what happens to us after death, and as you wonderfully heard our guest today say, when you get there, you're going to want to tell everybody about what happens after death, which is wonderful stuff. Mark Ireland can tell you, because the people who die want to tell us all. And unfortunately, the scientists don't want people to know this. And they're worried, I think, because Christianity doesn't have good news about what happens after death. They talk about hell, which doesn't exist. And they're worried that, I don't know what they're worried about, to tell you the truth, but they think it's a war between them and the Pope. And it's not. But to be frank, you can learn the truth at seekreality.com. And meanwhile, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy and make the most of this coming week in our one reality, always knowing that you are a powerful, eternal being, and you most of all in this whole universe. You are infinitely, eternally, and perfectly loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.